This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to the briefing. We are tracking a dangerous rescue mission deep inside Iran and a massive shift in federal spending priorities that could reshape the American social safety net.
Elite rescue teams face harrowing conditions searching for crew.
A U.S. pilot is recovered after being shot down.
President Trump navigates a rocky week of policy setbacks.
The air war in Iran grows increasingly messy and complicated.
The White House requests a record-breaking defense budget increase.
Trump suggests states should take over major federal programs.
The 2027 budget proposal prioritizes military over domestic needs.
Massive defense hikes pair with deep cuts to social services.
First, the rescue mission.
The situation on the ground in Iran is described as incredibly dangerous, as elite U.S. Air Force units conduct a combat search and rescue mission for a missing crew member. This follows the downing of a U.S. F-15 fighter aircraft. While one pilot has reportedly been rescued, the search continues deep inside hostile territory for the second person on board. These CSR missions are among the most complex operations the military prepares for, involving specialized pararescue jumpers known as the Swiss Army knives of the Air Force. They are trained to operate in contested environments where the enemy is also actively searching for the downed personnel. Verified video has already surfaced showing U.S. refueling aircraft and helicopters operating over Iran's Khuzestan province, highlighting the scale and the immediate risk of this ongoing recovery effort.
The technical difficulty of these missions cannot be overstated because they require a massive support package to be successful. A former pararescue commander noted that an operation like this typically involves at least 24 specialists scouring the area in Black Hawk helicopters, often supported by strike aircraft, to suppress enemy fire. The priority is establishing contact with the isolated service member and providing medical aid before evading capture. Time is the biggest enemy here, as Iranian forces are likely converging on the crash site simultaneously. The fact that this is happening deep inside Iran makes it a high-stakes race against the clock. If the rescue teams cannot extract the missing crew member quickly, the mission shifts from a recovery to a potential hostage situation, which would drastically change the political and military calculus of the entire conflict.
Now for the pilot.
We have more specific details on the rescue of the first pilot and the chaotic events surrounding the downing of the F-15. Reports indicate that the initial rescue mission itself came under heavy fire. An A-10 Warthog jet, which was providing cover for the rescue helicopters, was hit, forcing its pilot to eject over the Persian Gulf. Fortunately, that pilot was recovered. However, the helicopter that successfully picked up the F-15 pilot was also attacked, resulting in injuries to the crew members on board. Despite the damage, the helicopter managed to land safely, and all personnel are currently receiving medical treatment. This incident is a significant blow to the administration's narrative, as President Trump recently claimed that Iran's air defense capabilities had been decimated. The reality on the ground suggests that the Iranian military still possesses the means to threaten sophisticated U.S. aircraft.
The political stakes are rising, as Iranian officials have publicly stated that capturing any downed U.S. crew members alive is a top priority. There are even reports of a substantial reward being offered to anyone who finds the remaining intruder. This creates a very dangerous environment for the missing crew member, as local forces and even civilians might be incentivized to participate in the search. Meanwhile, the White House has been relatively quiet, stating only that the president has been briefed. Interestingly, Israel has reportedly held off on planned strikes in the search area to avoid complicating the rescue efforts. This pause shows the level of international coordination required when a pilot goes down. If Iran manages to capture the second crew member, it would give Tehran significant leverage in any future negotiations, potentially stalling the U.S. military's momentum in the region.
Next, Trump's difficult week.
Beyond the immediate crisis in Iran, President Trump is facing a series of domestic and political setbacks that have made this a particularly rocky week. Domestically, gas prices have surged above $4 a gallon, a direct consequence of the ongoing war and the instability in the oil markets. On the legal front, the president's push to end birthright citizenship faced skepticism at the Supreme Court, even from his own appointees. He also fired his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, adding to the sense of turmoil within the administration. These frustrations are mounting just as the war in Iran enters a more difficult phase. Critics are pointing out that while the president talked about ending the conflict quickly, there is no clear plan for withdrawal, and the loss of 2 warplanes in a single day undermines his claims of total air dominance.
The political implications are significant, especially with the upcoming elections. Analysts suggest that this week could be a turning point if Democrats are able to capitalize on the administration's struggles with the economy and foreign policy. The president's rhetoric about the war being nearly over is being tested by the reality of continued casualties and aircraft losses. Furthermore, his legal defeats regarding public media funding and other executive actions have added to the perception of an administration on the defensive. While Trump has maintained a confident public persona, the combination of high energy costs and military complications is creating a difficult narrative to manage. The contrast between his promises of a quick victory and the actual events on the ground is becoming harder to ignore for both his supporters and his detractors in Washington.
Moving to the war.
The downing of the F-15 marks a turning point in the 5-week-old conflict, as it directly contradicts the Pentagon's assertions of total air dominance. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had previously suggested that U.S. aircraft could strike with impunity, but the recent losses show that Iranian anti-aircraft equipment is still functional. This development complicates the president's timeline, as he initially estimated the war would last only 4 to 5 weeks. Now entering the 6th week, the administration is doubling down on aggressive rhetoric, with Trump threatening to bomb Iran back to the Stone Ages if they do not agree to his terms. He has also floated the idea of confiscating Iran's oil to pay for the war effort, suggesting that the U.S. could make a fortune by taking control of the Hormuz Strait, though he has offered no concrete plan for how to achieve this.
There are also serious legal and ethical concerns being raised about the conduct of the war. Threats to target civilian infrastructure, such as electric plants and drinking water facilities, would constitute war crimes under international law. Similarly, Secretary Hegseth's earlier vow to offer no quarter to surrendering soldiers has been condemned by legal experts. These statements could have dire consequences for any Americans captured by Iran, as they might affect how U.S. prisoners are treated. The loss of the F-15 adds to a rising human toll, with several Air Force crew members already killed in the conflict. As the war gets messier, the lack of a clear exit strategy and the escalating rhetoric are creating a volatile situation that could draw the U.S. deeper into a prolonged and costly engagement, with no easy resolution in sight.
Now, the budget request.
In a move that signals a massive shift in national priorities, the White House is asking Congress for a staggering $1.5 trillion for defense. This would be the largest expansion in military spending since World War II. The budget includes funding for ambitious projects like the Golden Dome missile defense system and a new fleet of Trump-class battleships. To pay for this, the administration is proposing deep cuts to domestic agencies, targeting programs related to climate change, housing, and education. The White House summary explicitly mentioned eliminating what they call woke and wasteful programs. This request is separate from the $200 billion already sought specifically for the war in Iran. It reflects the president's long-standing desire to boost domestic defense manufacturing and prioritize military protection over the federal government's traditional role in providing social services.
The scale of this increase is unprecedented, representing a 42% jump over the previous fiscal year. A significant portion of the funding, about $350 billion, is intended for the industrial defense base and would be sought through a budget reconciliation process. This tactic would allow the legislation to pass the Senate with a simple majority, bypassing the need for broader bipartisan support. The budget also includes pay raises for troops and massive investments in shipbuilding, which the president calls the Golden Fleet. Trump has been very vocal about his belief that the federal government should not be responsible for things like daycare or Medicaid, suggesting these should be handled by the states. This budget is the clearest articulation yet of that philosophy, placing the full weight of the federal purse behind military might while withdrawing from domestic social obligations.
Next, shifting costs.
During a private lunch with faith leaders, President Trump was even more explicit about his plan to shift the burden of social programs to the states. He argued that the federal government simply cannot afford to take care of daycare, Medicaid, and Medicare, while also funding a major war. His solution is for states to raise their own taxes to cover these expenses if they choose to provide those services. This candid admission was captured in a video that was briefly posted on the White House website before being removed. In the same speech, the president praised the dismantling of the Department of Education, suggesting that leaving education entirely to the states is a major achievement. This approach is largely driven by the immense cost of the Iran war, which is already straining the federal budget and causing friction with lawmakers in Washington.
The reaction from Democrats has been swift and critical. Representative Betty McCollum, a top Democrat on the House Appropriations Defense Subcommittee, has already signaled her opposition to the request for more war funding, calling the conflict a strategic and diplomatic failure. The president's comments about shifting Medicare and Medicaid to the states are likely to become a major flashpoint in the upcoming budget battles. Critics argue that most states do not have the resources to absorb the costs of these massive programs, which could lead to a total collapse of the safety net for millions of Americans. Furthermore, the president's rhetoric during the private event included disparaging remarks about specific communities and political rivals, which has only added to the partisan divide. As the administration pushes for more military funding, the debate over the role of the federal government is reaching a fever pitch.
Now, the 2027 budget.
The formal 2027 budget request released on Friday solidifies these priorities, asking for that record $1.5 trillion for the Defense Department. This represents a massive 42% increase from the previous year's resources. While the defense budget grows, domestic spending would see a 10% cut, totaling about $73 billion. These cuts would hit climate initiatives, housing assistance, and various social services. The administration's rationale is that these savings come from eliminating programs they deem weaponized or wasteful. However, as many analysts have pointed out, the math doesn't quite add up to a balanced budget. Even with the domestic cuts, the massive increase in defense spending will likely lead to a larger national deficit. This budget is a clear statement of the administration's values, prioritizing military expansion and border security over the traditional domestic functions of the federal government.
The budget also includes specific requests for the Department of Homeland Security, reflecting the president's focus on immigration enforcement. This includes funding for detention facilities and deportation operations. By pushing obligations back on the states for things like healthcare and education, the White House is attempting to redefine the social contract. This move comes at a time when the U.S. is not only engaged in Iran, but also conducting military operations in Venezuela and the Caribbean. The sheer volume of military activity is driving this demand for unprecedented levels of funding. However, the budget is ultimately a proposal, and it will face significant hurdles in Congress. Lawmakers will have to decide if they are willing to trade long-standing domestic programs for a historic buildup of military power, all while the country is actively engaged in a costly and unpredictable foreign war.
Finally, the domestic impact.
The proposed budget isn't just about the military. It also outlines a vision for a much more aggressive domestic enforcement agenda. The White House is calling for a 13% increase in funding for the Department of Justice, specifically to target what it calls migrant crime and violent criminals. It also seeks to maintain high levels of funding for immigration and customs enforcement, with plans to continue opening detention facilities that can hold over 100,000 adults and 30,000 families. These priorities are paired with the elimination of refugee resettlement aid programs. Budget Director Russell Vought emphasized that the plan is a fulfillment of the president's promise to reinvest in national security infrastructure. This focus on security and enforcement comes at the direct expense of non-defense programs, which would see their funding slashed across the board as the administration pivots toward a wartime footing.
Despite the focus on cuts, there are some areas of domestic spending that the president wants to highlight, such as a $10 billion fund for the National Park Service for construction and beautification. However, these are small compared to the massive shifts in healthcare and education funding. The president's assertion that the federal government cannot take care of daycare or Medicare while fighting wars sets up a major clash with Congress. Many lawmakers view these programs as essential federal responsibilities that cannot simply be handed off to the states. As the budget process moves forward, the administration's emphasis on military investments over domestic programs will be the central point of contention. This budget serves as a roadmap for the president's second-term priorities, showing a clear preference for a powerful military and strict domestic enforcement over the social safety net that has defined American policy for decades.
That wraps up our briefing for today. Join us again tomorrow for another focused look at the stories that matter most. This is OnePlace. Have a great day.